much for joining the Project on Ethics and Political Communication and our most recent conversation about what political communication professionals can do to improve the quality of American political discourse. My name is Peter Loge. I'm the director of the project and an associate professor in the School of Media and Public Affairs at the George Washington University. I spent most of my life on the other side of this as a strategic communications consultant, as a congressional staffer, as somebody who did this work while adjuncting at GW. Joined the faculty full time in 2017 and thought it would be a good thing to introduce ethics as part of the curriculum. You know, anybody who's studying journalism, public policy, medicine, business, law, public relations gets exposed to ethics throughout the course of their careers. There are textbooks and journals and conferences all devoted to ethics. More and more schools are offering degrees on political communication, minors, majors, graduate certificates, graduate degrees, and so forth. Almost every school offers undergraduate courses in speech writing, digital advocacy, digital ethics, and more. However, there's really not a whole lot going on with ethics. There's not a lot of, there's no infrastructure for ethics. There's very few textbooks, very few resources. So we launched the project to promote the study, teaching, and practice of political communication ethics. We've done this in a couple of ways. First of all, we're convening conversations like this. We've got video conversations that you can see online on our website. We've talked to digital leaders in digital politics on the left and the right. We had a conversation over the summer with a philosopher and a political candidate, which is a fascinating thing to listen to. We have a 5-question series in which political communications professionals, practitioners, students, and others answer the same 5 questions about ethics and political communication. We have digital conversations with people typing in and going back and forth, including one with the head of the college Republicans and college Democrats at the George Washington University. Back when we could all gather in person, they actually shared an office, which I thought was kind of a cool thing. We've written for publications like The Hill, for campaigns and elections, for some semi-academic publications, Media Ethics, National Communications Association, and others. There's a new textbook called Political Communication Ethics Theory and Practice. The students on this should probably go ahead and just buy it now because I'm going to assign it at some point. Others who are interested in politics also might find it interesting. Half of the chapters are from academics, writing about everything from the pre-Socratics of Machiavelli up to the ethics of digital advocacy and speech writing, and half are from political practitioners, lobbyists, opposition researchers, campaign managers, and others who actually do the day-to-day and the issues that they confront as they navigate campaigns. So we've been doing a lot of cool stuff. Our object, as I said, is to promote the study, teaching, and practice of this, which means obviously we want it in the classroom. We want academics to write about ethics. What does it mean to be an ethical political communicator? What are the boundaries of ethics? What is that, how does rhetoric get defined? Thousands-year-old questions. We'd also love to see some quantitative analysis. Do pro-democratic norm campaigns succeed more or less often than those that attack democratic norms? What are the long-term implications for political parties and candidates for running ethically questionable campaigns? We'd also love to see the press cover this more. Journalists do a very good job of writing about the legality of campaigns, whether or not somebody violated campaign finance law, for example. I'd love to see more coverage of the ethical choices. Just because somebody can do something by law doesn't mean somebody really ought to do it. I could dress up as in a bunny suit and stand across the street from a local elementary school shouting that Santa Claus is dead. That'd be perfectly legal, but it probably would not be a good idea. I'd love to see more coverage like that. And finally, I think it's all up to all of us who work in politics, work in candidate campaigns, advocacy and issue campaigns, to take it upon ourselves to make ethics part of our toolkit, to make ethics part of what we're doing. Which brings us to tonight's conversation. I am really excited to have 3 friends of mine join from different perspectives, slightly different angles on what it means to be an ethical political communicator. I'm going to introduce them in alphabetical order by first name. Then I'll kick off the question and answers. As I said, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. I'll see them and I'll try to ask them as we go, or I may call on you to ask the question. I want to make it pretty informal, at least to the extent we can. And we'll be done and out of here within the hour because we've all spent way too much time on Zoom as it is. Right, so in alphabetical order by first name, tonight's discussants are Nikita Sibley. Nikita is a graduate student here in the School of Media and Public Affairs at the George Washington University. He earned his undergraduate degree from Florida State. As a Democratic consultant based in Florida, his experience includes interning for both the state party and the state House of Representatives. He's also worked on several campaigns during the 2018 and 2020 election cycles. Next up is Oren Shur. Oren started his academic career as a baseball player at Emerson College, transferred to the School of Media and Public Affairs at GW, where I met him. Oren's resume is long. This is a piece of it. He oversees the day-to-day management of the Democratic consulting firm SKD Knickerbocker's political department. In 2020, he advised the Biden campaign's paid media team. In 2016, he served as director of paid media for Hillary for America. 2018, he was a lead media strategist and ad maker for Kansas Governor Laura Kelly's successful campaign in a state that Trump won by more than 20 points. He served as a communications director for U.S. Senator Ben Cardin, press secretary on the Cardin for Senate campaign in 2006, and as a campaign aide to former Senator Barbara Mikulski. Finally, alphabetically by first name, is Susan Del Percio. Susan is a well-known communication strategist and MSNBC political analyst, as well as an NBC News Think contributor. A lot of you have seen Susan a lot over the past several months. Susan advises corporate, public affairs, nonprofit, and political leaders in developing strategic communications and crisis management campaigns. She served as special advisor to Governor Andrew Cuomo and as deputy commissioner in the Giuliani administration. She's currently a senior advisor to the Lincoln Project. She earned her undergraduate and graduate degrees from Emerson College. Non-coincidentally, I also went to Emerson College and also taught at Emerson. So this is an all Emerson College SNPA affair. I want to make it clear that we're keeping it all in the family. So that's where we are. That's the setup. And I want to kick it off in reverse alphabetical by first name order with you, Susan, and ask the question we ask at the Project on Ethics and Political Communication. What ethical responsibility, if any, do you have, and to whom do you have it?
Well, that's a great question, because who do I have a responsibility to? First and foremost, to myself. I mean, that's what my big argument would be. And that's what I've been in this business for 30 years doing, is trying to keep a good reputation, doing good work, and staying within the boundaries. Now, of course, those boundaries have changed over time, but I still think you know when something is a light gray versus charcoal. Who monitors the ethical behavior? Well, I think unfortunately, a lot matters if you get caught. And that's a horrible thing to say, but that's the reality of it as we stand now. And until we have more conversations demanding more of our colleagues, that's exactly where we're going to stay. But I do think that there are a lot of people. I know consultants get a bad rap and everyone hates their consultants and every consultant's out to make money and that's all they're doing. But you know what? A lot of us work hard. I know people from both sides of the aisle who I have fantastic relationships with and trust and work with and have no problem. And I know people from both sides of the aisle that I would never work with. And it's those that I would never work with that are of concern. And I also think we forget to look at the candidates or the elected officials themselves. Some of them are not too ethical. And it's up to us as consultants to decide if we're willing to work with them and even sometimes call them out. So it's a hard question, but I say first and foremost, I'm responsible to myself.
So Oren, what do you think? You and Susan have worked on opposite parties, probably opposite campaigns. You both worked to help elect President-elect Biden. What's your ethical responsibility? What responsibility do you have?
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with Susan. First and foremost, you're always, have your own ethical barometer, and you need to feel good about the work that you do and sleep well at night. But I think we also have an ethical responsibility to the candidates who we work for, the elected officials who we work for, to be honest with them, both in things they want to hear and things that they don't want to hear. That's what they hire us to do. So I think there's a responsibility there. I think we have an ethical responsibility to the public. I mean, we're communicating with the public about their democracy and about candidates who are running to serve them. So I do think we have an ethical responsibility to the public. And, this is getting a lot more conversation now for obvious reasons, but I think we have an ethical responsibility to our democratic institutions, to the ways with which we are able to run these campaigns and have open elections. We have a free press, we have free and fair elections. I do think we have a responsibility, as all of us who are part of this ecosystem, to make sure that those are strong. And I think we all kind of find ourselves in a moment now where we're faced to have conversations we couldn't have even imagined having, and where you are seeing some people, and I'll give Susan and the team at the Lincoln Project a ton of credit, because you are seeing consultants and people conscience stand up in certain places, and we're obviously also seeing that not happen in certain places.
Nikita, you've been listening to this. You've got political experience, but you're relatively new in your career. Where's your responsibility lie?
I think my responsibility lies firstly to myself. I think when you're doing these campaigns, you always have to be true to yourself, because at the end of the day, when you go to bed at night, you have to think, am I doing something morally correct? So yes, I do believe that above all else, that you have to be true to yourself and be grounded in your own morals. I also believe that another ethical responsibility is to the candidate or to the client. And lastly, I agree that, the overall public as well, because we don't get this level of cynicism about politics without, doing something, being morally incorrect for as long as it has been. So I agree. I feel as though those three are the main targets of ethical responsibility.
Peter, I would like to just add one other thing, and Nikita reminds me of it, is that we have a responsibility to teach those who are coming into the business. I think that that's really important for people to understand, and that there is, especially in political communication, there's such a mentoring process that I think we have a responsibility to those who we're seeing come up through the ranks.
And I want to give you and Oren a shout out to that. I know, Susan, you've taught at Emerson College and you've done a number of panels with them, and Oren has come and spoken to my political communication ethics class. I know both of you are pretty committed to that. I want to come back to something though that Nikita suggested, and that's that voters are cynical for a reason, right? And somebody who I traded emails with before the conversation, said, Walter Shapiro emailed and said he wonders how many things that feed the profits of political consulting firms simultaneously undermine democracy. For example, I seriously doubt whether the next 100 or 200 million in TV spending in the Georgia Senate races will change a single vote, but the voice of doom narration and the grainy photographs will certainly undermine the joys of voting. Not that Trump and company haven't done that already in Georgia. So, which begs another question. One of my students asked, one of my undergraduates asked, he said, if the point of the conversation is, can consultants fix politics? Doesn't it beg the question, did consultants break it? What about the negative ads? What about the graininess? What about the rising cynicism? Is it, not to put too fine a point on it, but Oren, Susan, the three of us have made a pretty good living in this field for a long time. Is this our fault?
No, I'll say it. I mean, I don't think so. I don't think it's our fault as much as in any industry. There are bad apples. There are bad, in no matter where you look, and especially when it comes to sales, there are people who will sell you a bad stock or a bad house or whatever, or a bad car. That means there are bad apples in it. I don't think we broke it. And I think the other thing that you have to keep in mind when it comes to negative ads, now I'm not talking about untruthful ads, because I will put that in a separate category, but negative advertising, which Oren could speak to even more, that works. The reason why campaigns run negative ads, they work. And if you want to win, if you're in that environment and you need a negative ad, it's actually our responsibility to do it. Now, again, with certain caveats that you're not going beyond certain parameters and you are telling the truth. And another big thing is you're not manipulating data or video or other things. But I don't think we are necessarily part of breaking it. And I think the press has a role in that too.
What do you think, Oren?
Yeah, I agree with that. And look, I spend most of my time making advertising for candidates, and I can appreciate that it does get exhausting on the part of the viewer. So I sympathize with that. I do think it's all about where you draw the line, and are you being truthful in your advertising? I do think that there is something perfectly fine about telling the voters why they should vote for your candidate and why you believe they should not vote for your opponent, so long as you're, where I do think we have seen, and where I have seen over the course of the last 20 years, I do think that line is moving further and further from, as Susan says, to the gray area, to the charcoal, to the straight up kind of pitch black. And we are seeing that. And, I think there are a lot of reasons why that's happening. I think we all have a responsibility to try to push back against that wherever we see it happening. one of the things, as ad makers, we campaigns used to really care. So that you have reporters out there, right? I think we've all seen this where they'll give an ad or a statement, 3 Pinocchios or 4 Pinocchios, or they'll fact check it, and that used to be something when I managed campaigns and was the communicate. That used to bother us on the part of a campaign. If a reporter were to say that our ad was misleading or untruthful, we would really take offense to that, or that would bother us, and we would maybe not continue to run that line of attack. I think now in the news cycle, in the news environment we're in the politics we see today, candidates and campaigns sadly care less and less, frankly, about being called untruthful. And when you test these ads and show them to focus groups and things like that, they say, yeah, they're lying, but everybody lies, and it's kind of pox on everybody's houses. And that's a sad place. I'd like to think we can get back to a place where if you do cross that line, and the press does play a responsibility here as kind of the referees and objective mediators of some of this, that should bother a campaign, that should bother a candidate. And I think it's our job to make sure we are making strong arguments and aggressive arguments, but we're being fair and truthful and can defend our arguments.
There's also one other thing, just as Oren was saying, like we make ads and we typically do it for television and cable. The place where things have completely already gotten off the rails is in social media, especially Facebook, where there is just no one checking. I mean, at least if you put something a complete lie that can be proven or just goes beyond the pale, someone could choose not to air it. No one can choose not to air a Facebook ad unless it goes to the extreme where they just get, for really racist or, anti-Semitic or some kind of awful behavior. It's really bad out there.
So Nikita, you're more the digital native, right? When Oren, Susan and I were coming up, there was no internet. This is sort of the universe you swim in. What's your take on the digital media piece of this? Is it the fault of digital media? What do we do about that?
I don't think it's the fault of social media. I think when it comes to like campaigns, especially advertisements, I think people are having a race to the bottom because all they care about is winning. They don't care about the morality aspect. I'm back home in Jacksonville, Florida, and we share a media market with South Georgia. And so literally every time I watch TV, I get bombarded with, Kelly Loeffler ads or David Perdue ads. And so I think, and then if they get called out on it, they really don't care about that because, it's a lying mainstream media. And so I think we haven't got here solely because of political consultants, and we won't save it with only political consultants. We need everyone at the table, and we need to all care more about being morally right.
So I think Nikita raises 2 really good points here. One pivots to what do we do about it? Right? I mean, part of it is the ecosystem piece. I want to get to that because I know Susan, you and I we've all talked about that in the past, but the topic of this conversation is, can political consultants fix democracy? So what can you, Oren, Susan, Nikita, people like me do to make this situation better?
Well, sometimes it's just as simple as calling someone out on it. Or in my case, because I have been doing this for a long time and have a little security in it, I have called a former client saying, I'm good that you didn't hire me, but you can't hire this person. This is what you need to know. And been very direct and straightforward. So sometimes you have to call people out. Sometimes I think we're going to see more of this. You're going to see a culture where consultants are in fact called out, like we saw with the law firm representing Donald Trump by the Lincoln Project was called out. And, I think that there's certain issues with that. I take certain issues, but that's the environment where we are in, that I think public opinion can play a role in this.
Yeah, I think it takes a little bit of courage on everybody's part. I think as an advisor to these candidates and elected officials, we have a responsibility to call them out when, and maybe that's privately, maybe that's not, but if we think they're crossing the line, and ultimately we choose who we work for, and if somebody's ethics don't comport with ours, we don't need to work for them. And I think I think Susan's right. I think we do, it's also on the elected officials to not hire certain types of people, and it's like anybody in their careers. Everybody goes to work and interacts with folks, and needs to decide what they're comfortable with, what they're not, what they'll call out and what they won't. I just think the stakes are higher when we talk about a field that has such a consequence to the public. And and especially in this moment that we're in right now, we're in a pandemic. People are trying to get information out to the public in the best interest of their health and their lives. And that's difficult to do because there's so much distrust, misinformation out there, and it's literally costing people their lives. So, I think we've got to be more aggressive at doing what Susan's talking about, and making sure we're holding ourselves accountable, our colleagues accountable, the elected officials we work for accountable, and expecting them to do the same of us.
So a question though, the obvious question, one which comes in via the chat from someone not affiliated with Emerson College, but affiliated with me, my dad, Dean Loge, Yale, asks, what ethical issue in your work would lead you to resign? Where is that line? And somebody else in the chat also asked, where is that line?
Well, I've done it. So I can tell you, I had a client that basically said, I was dealing with a reporter on a very sensitive issue, and he told me to lie. And I said, no. And he went behind my back, went to the reporter, told the lie, I quit. But not everyone can do that, okay? So that's a really hard thing to do. Again, when you're starting in this business, you don't have the same confidence and stable of clients that you can go to. But for me, it's probably the lies that are the worst part. And there have been some cases where I think on the attack, not that the ads ever went out, but what they were thinking about doing, I just couldn't be part of.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Susan. My drawing line would definitely be lying or doing something just morally unethical. And so, yeah, I think that lying should be, I think lying should be a very good, withdrawal point. Also, I think, someone telling you to just do something, when it comes to me personally, if there was something like racist or homophobic, that would also be the drawing line.
Yeah, I'd add to that. I mean, and look, I've had the good fortune of choosing the elected officials and candidates who I've worked for, so I felt pretty good heading into those relationships about how they comported themselves. But Susan's right; not every young person will always have that decision or that luxury. I would add to that, if I were ever part of a conversation or found myself part of a conversation where it was being discussed how to make it more difficult for somebody to vote, a certain voter that we didn't think was supporting our candidate, that to me is a line that we should not cross in our politics ever. So that, in addition to what Nikita and Susan said, I think I'd draw.
I want to poke on this a little bit though, because Susan, I think, raises a really interesting point. Oren, you and Susan are at a point in your careers where you can afford to turn down a client, right? You're incredibly well established. You've worked on presidentials. You're high national profiles. Nikita is about to be straddled with massive amounts of unfortunate student debt. He doesn't quite have, sorry, Nikita. He doesn't quite have the luxury that you do. When you're like, is ethics at some point almost a luxury that a relative handful at the top have?
Well, I'll give you one experience. I won't go too into it because we only have an hour, but basically I had a senior party official make very uncomfortable moves to me when this is going back 25 years ago. I was in my early 20s, called me at home. Back then we didn't have cell phones. And I was extremely uncomfortable. I ended up going to my boss, who was influential locally. And I was really, I just didn't know what to do, because now I felt like I may be ruining the relationship between my boss's office and this very influential person. And it turned out, and this is how come I'm always really been proud for 99.9% of the people I've worked for, He called up the senior official, and what he did was say, hey, Bob, that's not his name. You have anything you want to discuss about the party? You call me. You don't need to call Susan. Now, nowadays, people are saying that's all wrong to do because he should have stood up, and it's, you know, the part of a Me Too issue. But what I appreciated about my boss was he handled it in such a way that I didn't get blackballed. Because if he would have addressed it head on, I probably would not have the career I have today. I would have been blackballed so fast, not by my boss, but by the other person. So sometimes it's finding the right person to have a confidence in, who can maybe maneuver you out of the client or in a different role.
I'd also add to that. I mean, look, I think some of the things we are talking about and some of the things we see on the news are the exception to the rule. I don't think we should. I think, Nikita, if we were giving you advice, I think you'll find that the vast majority of people to whom you would be working for, who are seeking elected office, are mostly good people who are in it for the right reasons. And that doesn't mean that they're going to make every decision exactly the way you would make it, or that there won't be difficult challenges in the course of a campaign and you're going to have to decide for yourself, is this something I can be part of or not? But I think you'll find on the whole that, you know, the exceptions to the rule wind up getting a lot more news than the people who just do the right thing. And more often than not, these candidates, especially when you go down the ticket and you're talking truly about people who want to serve their communities, they're mostly good people who are going to try to do the right thing. So.
Excellent, excellent. So what I want to do now is I'm getting lots of questions in the chat. I want to start getting to those and see if we can have a bit more of an interactive conversation. And I want to start with Sean Miller, who's the editor of Campaigns and Elections, which, for those not in the industry, is a publication, website, advocate or interest group, I guess, commercial enterprise. I don't know how you describe it quite, Sean, but that works on campaigns and elections. Its campaign consultants tend to be members, Democrats and Republicans, direct mail people, speechwriters, digital, all of that. And Sean and his colleagues have a real commitment to ethics. They try to foreground it. They write about ethics, and they take this stuff really seriously. And so I want to give the first sort of public question to Sean.
Peter, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's great to be here tonight with everyone. Nikita, I appreciate you being here as well. Oren and Susan, really great discussion. Wanted to ask you guys kind of a newsier question that relates to ethics along the professional front. Susan, I wanted to get your take. A lot of folks on the right have, you know, the never Trumpers would say that the folks who've worked in the Trump administration shouldn't be hired in the industry when they leave, right? There's a real question around that. I'm curious, from your standpoint, how you feel about that kind of a mark on folks' resume, if you feel like that should set people back in their career, depending on what role they had in the Trump administration. For Oren, I'm curious, you know, on the Democratic side, there's a real push to open up the D-TRIPS vendor relationships to allow vendors who work with primary challengers to get committee business. So that's kind of an accountability question, right? You've got upstart firms, who tend to take these clients on who work in primaries. Should they be allowed to have this business? I'm curious about your take on that.
Oren, you could go ahead and I'll back into it.
Yeah, I mean, look, my own opinion on the DCCC thing and working for challengers and incumbents, I think I could be wrong. I think the new incoming chair has said that he's going to readdress that policy, and that's probably a good idea. I think I don't think primaries are inherently a terrible thing. Sometimes they're a good thing. Often they're a good thing. So I think it's probably a good idea to revisit that.
And that's happened on the Republican side too, especially with vendors like pollsters or whatever. And I agree with Oren. That's a fine thing to open up. As far as saying no one should hire these people who worked under Trump, I don't think it's going to fall in that it matters that people say they shouldn't be hired. They're going to have their resume. If they're going to look for a job, they're going to have to explain what they're doing. And for example, if they're looking for a face forward position and they're going to be a spokesperson or do something in that role, their credibility is at stake, not because people call them out for it, but because of what they did. And I do think that, you are responsible, especially for your actions. You don't have to repeat what the lies the president tells. You choose to do that. When you lie to your colleagues, when you lie to the public, when you lie to the House or the Senate, that's on you. And that is your reputation, and you should be held accountable for it. And I don't think those people will be hired. It's going to be very difficult, because unless it's a very pro-Trump position in an organization that doesn't care about politics, it'll be interesting to see what they do, like with someone like Jason Miller. My guess is no matter where he lands, there will be a public campaign against him. Is that right? I don't know. It's what will probably happen, though.
What about the people that we don't see in the news? What about the the outgoing comms director at Commerce Department, whoever that happens to be, or somebody close enough to be in a position to say, this is enough, this has to stop? Well, where are they going to land?
Well, it depends what they did, what they did. Comms people across the government, right, in federal government, don't really do much. They really just refer to the White House. And I'm not joking when I say that. They're very limited in the roles that they can have, except for handling press releases, etc. Again, the stain of the Trump presidency will be right there on your resume. And it will be difficult, I think, for people to accept that. Now, if they go into politics and they stay on the extreme right or in this Trumpian culture, I guess they could do okay. But again, if you're at Commerce and you were the spokesperson there, basically anything where you have to say you served at the pleasure of the White House, you have some explaining to do.
Oren, thoughts?
Well, I mean, most folks on my side certainly would probably not be hiring these folks, so a little bit easier for us. But look, I mean, everybody in any job, is especially if they're in a controversial one, polarizing one, or one where they know that there's been a great amount of scrutiny on them, is going to have to take that forward with them professionally. I certainly hope in our arena that these folks do find it difficult to work on behalf of public officials, because I think a lot of what we see now just completely crosses a line into a very dangerous place. But my fear is that we'll just see a new crop of, sadly, candidates who want to emulate what we're seeing now, and that these folks will find homes with these candidates. And we're just going to see more and more of this. I hope that that's not true. We will do everything we can on the campaign trail to try to defeat these folks. But that's my concern, I guess.
And there's still a lot of Republicans who will be out there trying to defeat them with primaries, just so you know. I mean, I basically put myself out of work for a while by being a part of the Lincoln Project, because Republicans it take a very brave Republican to hire me. And I don't consider it a stain, but some would. So it can happen inside the government or outside the government.
So what you're saying, though, Susan, also is this is a brave position, basically, that when we're allowed to gather in person, your Christmas parties may be smaller. That's bold.
I didn't see it as brave. I honestly didn't. I've been an outspoken critic of President Trump since 2015. I remember having a lot of problems, but finally just what could not stand was when he came and put out the Donald Trump will ban all Muslims at the end of 2005. I remember I was about to go on set and the anchor was like, what's wrong? Because I went white. I was like, a Republican candidate just came up with a religious ban and he's popular. It was very disturbing. So it wasn't, I mean, I consider myself fortunate to be able to have an outlet to speak out, but I don't think it was brave. I don't know if you want to say it's an ethical priority, but I truly believe that the nation was at stake, the direction of where we were going to go, our democracy. We had some cracks with the pillars of it under Trump, and 4 more years would have crumbled. I don't know how much we would have survived. So I don't consider it brave. I consider that a call to duty.
All right. I want to move on to a slightly different topic because there's nowhere to go from there except to completely change direction. And I want to turn the floor over to a friend, Scott Widmeyer, who's one of the most respected PR people I know, Finn Partners and Widmeyer Communications. And he shot a question in the chat. Scott, what do you want to know? What's your issue?
My question is, it's a slightly different twist on ethics, but it's relevant to ethics. Is it too naive in 2020 for us to really think about the possibility that in the future, whether it's 2 years out, 4 years out, where there's going to be stricter limits on campaign spending, stricter limits on fundraising, and maybe moving to a more European, Canadian setup where there's a time frame for a campaign period, a time frame for advertising, and it's not this thing that goes on the way you all touched on it in terms of the obscene amount of money that's being spent in Georgia right now, and even in the past presidential campaigns, and the money that was wasted in Maine, the money was wasted in other states in the general election. I'm just curious what your all's thinking is on changing the whole funding apparatus.
I'm happy to go there. I mean, I'd love to see it happen. The challenge is the Supreme Court ruled in Citizens United that's a very difficult thing legally to do. You know, I think a lot of us, at least on our side, probably some folks on Susan's as well, would love to see that reverse course. But right now we're just in this world where you have federal spending limits per contribution, or contribution limits, not spending limits. You have most states have, not all states, most states have contribution limits. But once those limits are hit, right, you have these independent expenditures and these outside PACs that the Supreme Court has ruled they have a voice, and there's really no limit to that spending. And so long as that is the law, it's hard to see the spending going down. Now, I think you touched on a different point with, you know, just in the execution of these campaigns. I do think we just spend to the point of silliness sometimes, and you hit a point where you know, and this is the exception to the rule. These are the presidential campaigns, the high profile Senate races, where you just do see you know, inefficient spending, or spending to the point that it's just not impactful. That's kind of a different question. But I don't see the laws changing. At least I don't think constitutionally there's a ton you can do until the Supreme Court reverses course on that.
And there will be other outlets. I mean, there already are that we don't really talk about that much because it's so easy to set up a PAC, frankly, that you don't have to do it. But there are other ways, and you're just going to constantly have to close loopholes. So
right.
I think also the thing, and candidates themselves love it because besides the obvious that people are spending money on their behalf, it's the PACs that get to play ugly. Mm-hmm. And the candidates get to basically stay out there with a clean message, because now, unlike before, they don't have to play defense, or they don't have to do the attacking on their opponent. They have someone spending twice as much money than they could, doing their dirty work for them, basically. And that happens on both sides of the aisle. That's not a special thing. But as far as the money goes, you know, I just don't see it. And then you also have to be wary of it. You know, I'm from New York City, and I'm looking at the Democratic primary right now. And there are, I don't know, 18,000 people running. Right. And some of them are known and some of them are not. And if you're in campaign finance, you're getting matching funds, you are limited. And that can potentially hurt you. As far as being capped out against someone who's been a citywide office holder for 8 years. So you have to look at it at a lot of different levels, I think. But at the federal level, I don't see it changing anytime soon.
And to Susan, I mean, right now we kind of have the worst of both worlds, because as Susan said, the outside money comes in. That's often the nasty negative stuff. Not only do the candidates, are they able to say, well, that's someone else's, I mean, they are legally not allowed to coordinate with those entities. So they
Right.
don't have to stand by, you know, in their own advertising. In the federal races, they have to say, I'm so-and-so and I approve this message. They are legally not able to advertise there. And, you know, the stricter and you know, one could argue that strict contribution limits in a state is a good thing for democracy, but if it only means that more and more and more and more of that spending is happening on the outside, which the candidates are not accountable for, is that a good thing? I don't know. I mean, this is just
And the argument has
Yeah.
been made, if you had full disclosure and you had to report any contribution over $1,000 or a cumulative 10,000 within 24 hours, and it had to be seen online, and you ended some of the PAC spending, you know, would people give as much money if they didn't have that venue? So that's been something when you talk about parties negotiating on that issue, that's what they've kind of said, well, then don't cap me.
Yeah.
What do you think, Nick? You're seeing this from the other end. As you said, you're in Florida, you're getting the Georgia stuff. You've also done Florida races, right?
Mhm.
So what's your take on this?
Yeah, I don't think it's naive, but I think we are a far away from getting to that utopia. I think, you know, as long as we have dark money influences and, you know, widening polarization within America, I think we're going to continue to see, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars be spent. I think it was crazy that the challenger, Mitch McConnell, which pretty much everyone knew that she was going to lose that race, but because of the hatred to Mitch McConnell, she was able to gain, I think, 9 figures throughout her campaign. And so I think as long as we have, you know, dark money as well as, you know, partisanship, I don't think we'd ever get to that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we should, Nikita? I'm sorry, just as a different perspective, when Oren and I came up differently, looking at the system now, the only one you've ever seen, do you think it should change?
Yes, I'm a little large. I think a lot of reasons why Americans themselves are cynical is because of the role of big money when it comes to our politics. I think the way to, you know, fix politics is for the average everyday American citizen to see that government is working on their behalf. I think it's crazy that, you know, throughout this whole entire pandemic, while other countries are, you know, giving citizens thousands of dollars per month, we've only been able to do $1,200. And the big stick is because of corporate liability. And so I think when it comes to our system, there's a lot that needs to be done to fix it.
So maybe not good news you were looking for, Scott, but some interesting perspectives.
Good perspective. Very good perspectives. Thank you.
I do want to then come back to the day-to-day operation of this and things that are about to get worse, right? Oren, Susan, and I have all said it was different when we were coming up than when Nikita was coming up, and it's going to be different from Sydney Register, who's an undergrad here at GW, when she's coming up, and others. Something that is emerging, though, is threats of emerging technology. And Mark McLennan, who's a PR pro in Boston and has a podcast on public relations ethics, actually, I think has a really good and pointed question. Mark, what's your take?
Sure. Thank you, Peter. And one of the things that's really deeply concerning to me is the rise and the lowering cost of artificial intelligence. And that is going to make misinformation and disinformation more powerful and easily accessible than ever. And so how are the candidates going to fight back against unethical candidates, or as you mentioned earlier, the unethical PACs? They're going to be using AI to amplify in ways we can't even begin to imagine misinformation and disinformation, without doing it themselves, as you're saying, because that race to the bottom works.
You know, Mark, you raise a really good point. You're absolutely right. That's what frightens me, especially as someone who is not tech savvy. It scares me even more because it's just unbelievable to me what can be done. I think at this point, there are enough smart people out there in the industries that know how to catch this and that they do bring attention to it. But it will evolve, into something that I don't think we're going to really be able to defend against. It will happen, and it will be about how candidates respond to it. And I just want to say about ethics and PR, I went to Emerson College, and the one thing all of us PR people and politicos did was visit Edward Bernays. He lived until he was almost 100. And one thing that has always stuck with me is he thought that PR, and I think political PR would fall into it, should be licensed. And he wrote about this in the 40s. In the 40s. So it was before all of this craziness. He thought we should be licensed and held more accountable. Now, I don't know if, obviously it was not possible then, or it never got pursued, but I do think that that's something that we could look at if you could get personally fined, because right now a campaign gets fined for their bad activity, not necessarily the people who are putting it out there themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, Mark, you raised the point. I mean, this worries me more than probably anything else happening in our campaigns, because we have ourselves, we run the campaigns, we have PACs, we have political practitioners, but anybody with a computer or a phone or, you know, is capable of doing this sort of thing. And, you know, why it's so different than even 10 or 20, it's not, I mean, you have kind of your AI deep fake kind of that world. Then you also just have misinformation, conspiracy theory, QAnon, kind of that whole crazy land, which, you know, these conspiracy theories, I mean, they've been around, conspiracy theories have been around forever. You used to have to seek them out and be the type of person that sought them out to get them. Now they seek you out. And that's the scary thing. If you are somebody who is persuaded by certain types of information, it will find you. It will not be difficult to find. And we're seeing so much of that out there right now. And then, yeah, obviously it doesn't help when our president, frankly, is amplifying it. But Mark, I think this is what we, as the people who run campaigns, this is one of the most important things we're going to have to figure out how to stay ahead of. We're going to need the tech community to work with us and not against us. I mean, really, I directed the advertising program for Hillary's campaign. I mean, only after 2016 did we even see some very basic accountability measures being put in by Facebook and some of these tech companies, where basically you could just say whatever you want or buy advertising and it not be reported. Foreign actors, we all kind of lived that and saw that. So I do think we need a partner in the tech community to help us too, and the media's got to be part of it. And you know, but at the end of the day, it will come down to individuals also needing to decide what they believe and what they don't. And you know, it's going to be the world we live in. It is the world we live in.
So Nikita, I know this is part of the waters you swim in SNPA. We have the Institute for Data, Democracy, and Politics, run by Rebecca Trumbull and Steve Livingston and others. Data is part of what you are learning, what we are teaching. How do you view this?
I agree with both Oren and Susan. I think going forward, it's going to be very tricky waters to deal with the rise of AI. I think there are also, you know, when you go on Facebook, because of these, I guess because of how they calculate, you can have your own worldview and not be challenged. And I think that will just, you know, I guess you're just putting gasoline on fire when it comes to AI and all these conspiracies. And so I do think that it's a very troubling, it's going to be a very troubling aspect of our politics going forward.
And just to add in one thing, bringing it back to money, it's so cheap. That's what's disturbing, is the amount of people you could reach. It's not like TV ads. You could reach 10,000 people for like $42. It's not hard. It's really disturbing.
So I'm getting more and more troubled. With an eye to the clock, I want to ask, I'm going to go to one more question, then ask each of the panelists for any final thoughts, and I'll wrap it up. And the last question I think is only appropriate, goes to a student here at the School of Media and Public Affairs, Sydney Register. Sydney is majoring in political communication and minoring in applied ethics. And I can attest firsthand, she's smart and thoughtful. So Sydney, what do you got?
Yeah, hey guys. First of all, great conversation on the AI aspect. I cannot wait to have the world of personal data rights unfold and as I develop my career. But my question actually goes more into the partisan side of things. And I'm wondering, do you guys see the same willingness to operate ethically on both sides of the aisle because of the the direct difference in messaging that we're having within conservative and democratic social groups right now is the conservative messaging that's rooted very heavily in unethical matters. Let's be honest, at least I view it as that. Is that a dividing force right now? And are people on both sides of the aisle willing to do what we're asking them to and operate ethically in their daily interactions? What do you guys think about it?
I can take that. I feel as though a lot more on the right, you see an ability to act unethically, and that's just not because of my partisanship. I think in order, you get rewarded for acting unethically, and then if you act with ethics, you get punished. We can just see what's happening with Fox News, Newsmax, and One American News Network. Literally, Fox News is being punished simply because of a tweet by Donald Trump. And so I think when it comes to the right-wing ecosystem, if you were to act morally and call something out, then you will suffer the consequences. And so I think we need to fix that moving forward.
Susan, Oren, thoughts?
I'll let Oren go and I'll pick up
Well,
the Republicans.
I mean, look, I'd like to think in pre-Donald Trump, we could have a conversation, and I don't want to pretend that there are not unethical actors in the Democratic Party. Of course there are. This is not a purely partisan thing. I do think though that Donald Trump, I mean, he's the president of the United States, and he's taken this to a completely different place. And I'd like to believe that if a Democratic president were doing and saying some of the things that this president is doing and saying, that we would have people like Susan is, and like some of the folks on the Republican side, stand up and say, this is not okay. We are not going to be part of this. This is wrong. So, you know, I don't think there's definitely something different happening within the conservative movement, Republican Party, however we want to characterize that. I say that as a partisan Dem, but I believe that to be true. But Sydney, I do think we, within our own campaigns on the Democratic side, including in primaries and things, we confront our own ethical issues. They're just not blaring at you from the White House every day the way that, you know, the way that we're seeing on the other side.
Okay, so on the other side of the aisle, I think Oren, I'm so happy you said Oren, that before 2016, there was room for a certain conversation with both sides. It is a nightmare now. Donald Trump has broken every norm and has gone beyond the pale in so many ways. I mean, it just makes me like physically ill to think about it. The question is, and this is what I really wonder about, and I'm hope I'm right, is that Trump only works for Trump. Being Donald Trump and doing the stuff he does really only works for him. So can another senator, once he exits the stage, can someone try and fill his shoes with similar rhetoric and get away with the behavior? I don't think so. I don't think that they will be able to. I think by hook or by crook, Donald Trump got away with it, but I think only Trump can be Trump. So I will be a little bit hopeful. It will take a little time, but it was just so dominated by such incredibly poor and potentially illegal behavior. I mean, we know it was illegal. We know he paid off a porn star. He is he is listed in a document in Manhattan District Court. So we know he's broken the law when it comes to the campaigns.
Here's the thing, you will see, I think you're right. There is obviously something, I don't think we know whether somebody can replicate Trump, but I think you're going to see a heck of a lot of people try. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to call that out just the same, and I know you guys will. I'm not.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. The question is will they do it and fail? And I think that they may fail, because I think those people will they'll eat each other's young. They will just go after each other and have them both fail, which would be great. It'll clear the field much better for future Republicans. So I'd be happy to have those lunatics out.
Excellent. Excellent. With an eye to the clock, you were just about at 7. I want to ask the panelists if they have any closing thoughts. I'll do some last second logistics and send you all on your way. Quite as this, we didn't plan this order. How are we going to roll with it? I want to go in reverse order than we started with. So we'll go Susan, Oren, and then end with Nikita. Susan, any closing thoughts, final bits of wisdom?
I think what we do is very important. The role we play in our elections and our democracy. I think we should be held more accountable. I think we shouldn't be as depressed as we all are about the whole thing. There is goodness. You know, when I was starting out, we used to say that good government is good politics. We did campaigns because we believed in policy and we wanted to see those policies enacted. Now it has unfortunately become a bit of a grind, but I think there's some growing pains that the industry is going through right now. And I'm hopeful. I look at Nikita and I am hopeful.
Oren?
Yeah, I'll pick up where she left off. I think it's I think we are in a weird, scary, concerning place right now in our politics and in the work that we do. And I think I am heartened to see that you're, Peter, that you're teaching the class you're teaching, and thank you, because I think one of the most important things we can do is work with our young people coming up who want to work in this field, and just make sure that they accept and embrace the fact that ethics is part of this, and we need people with a strong ethical barometer who are not going to abdicate those principles as soon as they get into politics, but rather be truer to them. And we've talked about this in the past, but it's having the self-awareness to just hit the pause button and ask yourself, is what I'm being asked to do ethical? Is what I'm about to recommend ethical? Will I feel good about this the day after election day, win or lose? Is this something that I feel good about recommending to my candidate? And if we can instill in that sense with our young people coming up, that ability that it is not just a race to the bottom, and the means do not always justify the ends, then you're doing good work here.
So Nikita, it sounds like it's all on you. Susan
I
sees
hope not.
hope in
I
your
hope
eyes.
not. I hope not.
So what are your final thoughts? Are you saving us from this madness?
Yes. Thank you all for speaking, but I feel as though my final thoughts are regarding ethics and politics is that you must remain tethered to your morals and principles. I think even though some people, especially young, might, do a race to the bottom, I think that eventually catches up with you. And as we are a small community and we all know each other, I think you're only as good as your reputation, and reputation matters. And so at the end of the day, I think moving forward, we just must remain ethical and tied to our principles. I think that's very important.
Excellent way to sum it up. Excellent. Thank you all so much for participating. Thank all of you for making time on a Thursday to join a conversation about ethics. Not everybody would do that. We appreciate those of you who have. Thank you, Oren, Susan, and Nikita, for being a part of this, and also for the work you're doing. Right? I believe deeply in our democracy and our politics, and I'm proud that the field, my chosen field, is full of people like Oren and Susan, and that people like Nikita and the other students on this call want to be a part of it. For those of you who are interested in the project on ethics and political communication, you're going to be getting a follow-up email in the next week or so with a link to the video of this and maybe some other material. You can follow us on Twitter at polycomethics, and of course online we're at ethicsinpoliticalcommunication.org. Eminently Google. If you Google political communication ethics, this project is an alarming number of the results. So check us out. And thank you all again. Have a terrific evening. Thank you.
Okay.